Well, we got our guest on the line. I'll let you do the honors, Jersey World, because this is the third week in a row, man, that you've gotten a great guest. So I just got to give you props on this. So I'll let you go ahead and introduce our next guest.
Well, I just got to thank these guys for taking time to even, grace us with their presence on the Sports Critic. But, ladies and gentlemen, as advertised earlier in the week, we got my man from CBS.com, Gary Parrish, 92.9 FM ESPN in Memphis. You can catch my man 4 to 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, Monday through Friday. Gary, glad you could join us tonight, man. How you doing, my good man?
I'm perfect. I appreciate you having me. How are you?
Oh, doing great, my good man. Doing great. Know you had a great Father's Day, man. I'm sure you're in the midst of some family activities right now. So we'll go ahead and hop to it, man. We've been talking NBA draft. We've been leading up to Thursday. And the first question I want to shoot you, first I just want to thank you for joining us on the Sports Critic. I am the co-host, Jersey World. My man, Drew Patton, he is the host of the show. The silent partner may chime in with a question or two. But just coming into this draft, we hear a lot of it about guys not really being superstar quality guys. From your perspective, who are some guys that no one is really talking about in this draft that could be pretty solid players?
Well, the one guy who I think is probably not on a lot of people's radar because he didn't play in a BCS conference and he wasn't on TV a lot, Kawhi Leonard, a kid from San Diego State. He was not a heralded high school recruit, but he's a specimen. Listen, there's a lot of things he can't do, but he can guard like crazy. He's great in terms of high energy, and his potential's through the roof. He's going to be somebody who's going to be picked in the top 10, probably in the top 10 of a weak draft, but the top 10 nonetheless. And I don't know what kind of impact he'll have this year, but I wouldn't be surprised if we looked up in 5 years and we're describing him as an NBA All-Star because he's got all the stuff that you would look for in a guy who you want to be an NBA player: right size, athleticism, terrific motor. And it's just a case, if this kid played at Duke, Carolina, somewhere like that, people would be in love with him. He played at San Diego State. Even though they were ranked in the top 10 most of the year, most people didn't see him play. But I've seen him in person, I think 3 or 4 times, seen him on television, obviously a bunch. And I think if somebody, whatever team drafts him, is going to feel really good about it in a couple of years. He's a terrific, terrific prospect.
Gary, this is Drew Patton. I'm the host. I'm the sports critic. I want to ask you real quick, man, and thank you so much for joining us, by the way.
Of course.
I want to ask, just in this draft, you said it's a weak draft, and I kind of tend to buy into that as well, but I'm kind of interested in the Cleveland Cavaliers. Is Kyrie Irving as good as advertised, in your opinion? Just considering that we hadn't seen a whole lot of them in college?
When I say a weak draft, what I mean is that it's week 1 through 30 in the sense that, at 10, you're not going to get the same caliber guy that you might get in a different draft. But at the top, I think it's rock solid. I love Kyrie. Listen, I saw him enough at the AAU circuit, when he was in high school, that I didn't know what to make of him. I didn't know if he was really as good as people said. But when you see him in college, and think about this, he only played 12 games, in college. That's it. And they all were in November and early December. So there wasn't a lot there. But you saw Derrick Rose in college. You saw John Wall in college. And those guys were not impact players, in November, December. But Kyrie very clearly was the best player on his team from the start. And that's a team that was preseason ranked number 1 in the country that had Kyle Singler and Nolan Smith, 2 other first-round caliber picks. Nolan Smith, who went on to be some people's, national player of the year. And when Kyrie was playing with those guys, he was very clearly the best player on that team, and they knew it just as well as you and I did. So the idea that he could be that good, Derek didn't become Derek at Memphis until really late February, early March. Kyrie was awesome from the start. So that kid would be a number 1 pick in any draft, not in any draft, not the LeBron James draft, probably not the Greg Oden, Kevin Durant draft, maybe not even the John Wall draft, but that kid would be special regardless of the year. If people would have seen him be able to develop throughout December, January, February, March, I think we'd all be on the same page. There's a lot of reports out there right now that suggest that the Cleveland Cavaliers are still debating what to do. Kyrie Irving, Derek Williams, Kyrie Irving, Enes Kanter. That's already done. Kyrie Irving's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft, and he should be. He is a terrific, terrific high-character kid who knows how to play, understands how to run a team. He's got good size for his position, and my guess is very, very soon, maybe even this first year, we'll acknowledge him as one of the top 10 point guards in the world.
Well, this is the thing that kind of fascinates me about a guy I'm thinking about, GP. You talk about a guy that has good size for his position. Tell me about Chandler Parsons and what type of pro you think this kid can be. I like the kid a lot. I think he may be a solid pro. What's your takes on Chandler Parsons?
I love him as a person. Like, I've known him since he was in high school. I talked to him as recently as earlier this week. I think he's tremendous. He can do everything pretty well. He's not great at any one thing. I wish he was a little more assertive. There were times at Florida where I kind of wanted him to just take over games, and I've talked to him about this. And that's not really his deal, but it might be better at the NBA level, because at the NBA level, he's not going to have to take over games. He's just going to have to be good at what he does. And he's obviously, he's like 6'10", and he can shoot the ball. And if you can do that, clearly there's a place for you in that league. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if he gets taken late in the first round by a team that doesn't need a star, by a team that doesn't need anything other than to just fill a part on their roster. And he's certainly capable of that. I'm a big fan of Chandler, not as being the best player on your team, because that's what they needed to be at Florida, and he wasn't really capable of being the best player on a team at an extremely high level, though that team did go to the Elite Eight. But in terms of, can he come off the bench and do nice things for you, can he be a relevant basketball player on a playoff team? I don't think there's any question. I'm a big fan of his.
We're speaking to my man, Gary Parrish of ESPN Radio down there in Memphis, 92.9, and CBSSports.com. I think my producer wants to ask you a real quick question about an international player. Go ahead.
Thanks for joining us, sir. What, if anything, do you know about the Lithuanian? His name eludes me. I cannot pronounce the name properly. I don't want to butcher it. But who wouldn't want a 7-foot, 225-pound power forward that you could put beside another big man at center? Is he all he's made out to be?
Well, here's the thing. There's some that, there's some people who actually like him better than they like Enes Kanter. I don't know if I feel that way about him. And let me be honest from the front. I haven't seen him, obviously, as much as I've seen the American college kids. But the problem is, when's he going to be able to come over here and play in the United States? There's recent reports, I think in the past 24 hours, that suggest he's going to at least have to spend 12 months, another year, outside of the United States. But to me, and I talked to Jonathan Gavoni from DraftExpress.com about this earlier today, if you're planning for the future, you shouldn't really be concerned with when the guy's coming as much as, is this a difference maker? And there are a lot of people who think that he absolutely is. And so, if there's some that suggest that maybe Cantor could go 3, and then this kid's on the board at 4. Do you take him at 4, even if you've already got Kyrie Irving? You take Kyrie Irving 1, you take this kid at 4, because in terms of just strictly talent and upside and all that stuff, he's probably the right pick there. But there's some concern about, when will you get it? Well, let's pretend that Ricky Rubio comes over here and he's the difference maker that a lot of people think he's going to be. Do you think the Timberwolves regret at all having to wait 2 years for that to happen? Probably not, because now you've got an impact player on the way. And that's the same way I feel about this kid. Think long-term, not short-term. And if he's the real deal long-term, it shouldn't be concerned to you whether he's coming over right now. You should be looking ahead, but 5 years from now, are you going to have one of the top 3 or 4 or 5 players from this draft? And a lot of people I know think he might be that.
I'm going to ask you one last question, then Jersey will probably have one last before we let you run. This is Drew Patton again, the Sports Kritik, and we got my man Gary Parrish on the line from ESPN Radio down there in Memphis, 92.9 at CBSSports.com. Tell me this, because this has kind of troubled me a little bit. When I look at a Nolan Smith, and I look at a lot of the American players that are 3 to 4 year players that are now being bumped for, the Lithuanian kid that the silent partner mentioned, and other guys like Enes Kanter, and just how the NBA now has really kind of taken more so to the international player more so than the college player. Does that bother you a little bit that we don't know a whole lot about these international guys and we're hoping that they'll be great?
Well, I've always said for a long time, if you take Jawan Johnson, say from Purdue, a kid who's probably going to slip to the second round, you take Jawan Johnson and change his name to some French name and put him in some European league, we'd be in love with him, because he'd be a 6'9" kid who could step on the perimeter and shoot it. And that's always bothered me a little bit. The kids here in the United States, they get picked apart a little bit. I think it's happening right now to Jimmer Fredette. I think it happened a few years ago to Joakim Noah. We see them so often that we start to focus on what they can't do as opposed to what they can do. And I think with the European players, the guys we've seen very briefly, we start to focus on what they can do instead of what they can't do, because we don't watch them enough to know what they can't do. And I do think the European players benefit from that. But then you look at, what somebody like Dirk has done the kid up in New York has done. I mean, this is a global game now. And, when we're doing NFL drafts, it's very clear. We're drafting kids from Ohio, Florida, Texas, and Washington. In the NBA now, everybody's playing the sport in the world. And so I would never, criticize somebody for going overseas, but you got to be very careful. What are you looking for? Jimmer Fredette, I know what he can't do. But let's not focus on that. Let's focus on what he can do. With Joe Kim a few years ago in Florida, everybody started focusing on, well, he doesn't have any offensive moves. That's fine. But what can he do? He can rebound. He blocks shots. He's high energy. He's a great leader. He's a winner. Let's focus on that. We didn't. So he dropped lower than he should have dropped. With the European kids, they seem to get the benefit of the doubt a little bit more because we haven't seen them enough. That bothers me. But at the end of the day, it's not a mistake that I'll make that'll cost me. It's a mistake that an NBA team will make that it'll cost that franchise.
No question. Well, GP, I appreciate you again, man, taking time out to join us. I'm going to get you out of here on this one, man. Following the Grizzlies as close as you have, being in the area, what kind of player are they looking for, or do you think they need coming off the playoff run that they have?
Well, picking 49th, you're not going to get a guy who can impact you. I mean, there's been some, people try to oversimplify it, and they say, well, the Grizzlies need a shooter, and that's true, so go get John Diebler. Well, the problem with having John Diebler on your team is that most rookie shooters, you're not going to get on the floor anyway. So let's pretend John Diebler's a great shooter. Well, where is he going to play? You still got Tony Allen. You still got Rudy Gay. You still got, Sam Young. And he's not getting minutes. He's not stealing minutes from any of those guys. So the reality is, and I think what we'll find out over the next 2 days, is that the Grizzlies are just going to take best available prospect at 49, or they're going to do a deal of some sort that'll either move them up in the draft or out of the draft completely, and they'll get a veteran player. Monte Ellis has been rumored as a possibility. Cal Korver has been rumored as a possibility. But I don't think you can pick it. I don't think you can be a second-round playoff team that took Oklahoma City to the 7th game and then think that you're going to get help for your roster at 49. It's possible, I guess, but it's certainly not likely. So I don't even think they're thinking in those terms. But I'll be shocked if the Grizzlies just stand pat and don't do something. My guess is they do something between now and Thursday night, or even on Thursday night, to move O.J. Mayo. I don't think Rudy Gay, but that's being tossed around a little bit. But I'll be surprised if they just stand pat and pick 49, because at 49, you're probably not helping a playoff team.
Well, Gary, man, we want to thank you so much, man, for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us, man. Real quick before we let you run, let my listeners, at least for the podcast, the guys that listen to the archives, let them know where they can hear you at, man.
Well, every day from 4 to 6 on 92.9 FM ESPN, and then, of course, my columns are over at CBSSports.com. I'd like to think that if you have some sort of success in the world, you don't have to work 2 jobs, but I'm the opposite of that rule. I'm working myself to death, but I can't complain. It's better than most people's jobs.
Well, absolutely, man. We're trying to get where you at, man. So, again, we definitely appreciate you coming on the show, man, and don't be a stranger, man. I need to actually add you on Facebook, too, man.
Hey, you guys are awesome. I appreciate you having me on, and anytime I can help you, I'm happy to do it. I really appreciate you having me tonight.
All right, GP, take care, man.
Thank you, sir.
Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
All right.
All right, GP.
That's my man, Gary Parrish of ESPN 92.9 and CBSSports.com, dropping some science on the NBA draft, man. I want to kind of piggyback on something that he said. I think what's interesting is that he kind of sold me a little bit on how to really look at some guys.
What did he say about Fredette? I wanted to ask him about that, but he kind of said it. Don't worry about what he can do. Let's focus on what he can do.
Herm Edwards said that in the NFL, and I think for a lot of times, because again, the analysis changes when it comes to the NBA versus NFL. It just does. And a lot of times, in particular with the quarterback position, we'll pick a guy. We'll pick him apart.